Alright everyone, I think that we have the final sort of piece of information that we need to judge that Joe Biden really is truly out to lunch and doesn't know what the fucking shit he's doing. He is apparently, according to reports, considering Andy Cuomo for Attorney General if he's elected. Yeah, Andy Cuomo is on the short list. Now, that would take him away from certain pertinent duties, so I'm not sure that he would even accept such a position, to tell the truth, and he'd be wise not to. Do you mean the same Andy Cuomo empowering Bill de Blasio to close down places of worship in New York City? Literally rounding up the Jews because they were protesting against synagogue closures? That Andy Cuomo? Or the Andy Cuomo who killed 12,000 elderly people by taking the sick at the outset of the coronavirus pandemic, putting them in old folks' homes, which under CDC guidelines was only a thing if there was an overload in the hospitals. An overload that you will remember literally never happened in the state of New York or indeed anywhere else in the United States. Not a single ICU was overrun. Not a single hospital was crowded past capacity. There was never a legitimate reason under CDC guidelines or the guidelines established by the WHO or any other legitimate medical body in the whole world. There was never a reason to endanger the old, who are at the highest risk for dying of COVID, by taking the sick and putting them in old folks' homes. Cuomo ignored this. He's been called out repeatedly, and yet people still don't even know that it ever happened because of a wall of goddamn legacy media propaganda that's aimed at blaming Trump for the poor coronavirus response. Well, when I look at the case totals soaring around the entire world to the point where even the normally laissez-faire Dutch are masking up, it has nothing to do with Trump's response. Not in a million years. And the idea that China and certain other Southeast Asian countries magically got rid of this virus by doing absolutely nothing that wasn't done in neighboring countries is totally asinine as well. Essentially, you've got the tale of two possible administrations over the next 4 years. You have Trump, the devil you know. He's not perfect. He's certainly made mistakes. He's incoherent most of the time and on diplomacy has made blunders. But the economy's staggering along. Joe Biden keeps saying, well, I bailed us out of one recession, I'll do it again. Joe, you didn't have anything to do with economic proposals even under the Obama admin. You were the VP, not the President of the United States. Trump has reigned over a strong economy, and if it weren't strengthened by Trump's deregulation, we'd be in the shitter right now. The idea that we're even technically in a recession at this point, I'm not even 100% sure that we technically are. We seem to have recovered insofar as the jobs went. Unemployment is, in the mid-single digit range again. It's not as good as it was a year ago, but it's certainly better than it could be. It's certainly better than it ever was under Obama. It's very funny because they're like, well, the Obama economy is so structurally sound. Oh, well, without changing any policies other than deregulation, somehow Trump is responsible for a lockdown that was pioneered by pretty much everyone in the world. Interesting. Or we can go with Biden. Biden's so out there, he thinks that Andy Cuomo should be the Attorney General of the United States. Again, you told us that basically if you wanted to go outside and get a burger back in March or April, that you wanted to kill grandma. Andy Cuomo literally did kill grandma. He killed thousands of grandmas and grandpas, and a bunch of other people, I'm sure, too. Literally endangering the stability of his own state. That's what Cuomo's known for. I believe, isn't he the one that's literally like, isn't he Frito's brother or something like that? The one that broke quarantine to go for a jog and then threatened a biker who tried to stop him? That one? What a wonderful family they are. I'm sure, that'd be a great AG. I can imagine it'd be probably worse than Eric Holder. You remember the dude who oversaw Fast and Furious? Who sold machine guns to Sinaloa, to a bunch of drug cartels down in Mexico, causing, however many thousands of deaths by cartel violence? That Eric Holder? Hell, I think that the Cuomo would be worse. I think he'd be one of the most disgraceful AGs in U.S. history. And a blatant partisan. There's no question about that. You might as well option Bill de Blasio himself. Cut out the middleman. Don't even go with the dude who gets a D- on pretty much every marker. Go with the dude who's even lampooned now by his own city's population. Just go with Jew roundupper de Blasio if you want a real divisive AG. Joe Biden's completely nuts. You've got to be nuts to even consider this. And the optics were terrible. Look, on pretty much every announcement of this fact, he's getting panned for it. Even Biden fans, I don't think even many of his fans would enjoy having Cuomo be part of his presidential team. Certainly not at the level of AG. Make him Secretary of Health. That'd make just about as much sense. Andy Cuomo is not actually that well liked. Look, in an extreme blue state like New York, yeah, Andy Cuomo can skate by. Most everyone else in the country realizes he's a nut. He's literally nuts. His response was a complete and utter failure. He's like, well, we're going to run out of ventilators. Trump delivers the ventilators to him. He never uses them. They have to get fucking returned because the overcrowding that he suspected would exist never happened. And there's why he put the old folks' homes full of COVID patients. He thought that there was an imminent risk of an overflow. Instead of waiting until the last minute, which under CDC guidelines would make sense, under common sense would make sense, instead of waiting to see whether there would be an overload, he just flew the coop in the first place and said, well, we're just going to cut down the number of people that are allowed to be in the hospital. We're going to stagger the beds. Instead of 4 people in this room, you can only have 3 or something. He reduced their capacity, thus justifying sending them to the old folks' homes, killing 12,000 plus people in the process. New Attorney General? Do you need any more reasons not to vote for Joe Biden? This goes out to the leftists too. Do you approve of Cuomo's response? Being so hilariously inept. When people talk about all the Americans that Trump killed, most of those deaths have been in blue states that had heavy-handed lockdown policies, among people like Northam, among people like Newsom, and among people like this, like Cuomo, who have Trump derangement syndrome up the ass. They're blue state governors. They're liberals and so-called progressives. Those are the people that have reigned over most of the deaths in the United States. A statistical reality. It's not fake. I remember when they were saying, well, Florida's the new super spreader state. Remember when the cases were rising, 2 months ago in Florida? Oh, look, they ended their lockdown. There are new cases. Oh my God, the world's ending. Cases are rising everywhere, regardless of lockdown or no. It literally doesn't matter what we do because the disease has become a worldwide endemic thing. I warned of this back in February. Nobody wanted to listen. They didn't think that they needed 2 weeks of extra food. Then there were food runs. They didn't think it'd become endemic. Oh, it's nothing. Then they freaked out about it. Then they said it was nothing again. Now they're saying, well, Trump did it. And when it came from a Chinese biolab many, many moons ago, came from China. The Chinese government very wisely didn't tell anyone it existed because it didn't want to have to deal with a pandemic in its own borders and then have to lock everything down, destroying its own economy while everyone else did well. I guarantee that the Chinese government made a conscious decision to allow it out of the country. They knew about it beforehand. They could have stopped it. They chose not to. That's the final thing I'd say. If Biden had any balls, he would echo the sentiment that China should be sued by every other country for every single death and incapacitation as a result of coronavirus. The nation of China provably could have stopped it. They did nothing to do so and even hid details that they knew about the virus for weeks in order to allow it to spread. They spent weeks claiming there was no human-to-human transmission, letting the rest of the world come to that grisly conclusion itself, and now millions of people around the world are dead. That is the fault of the Chinese government. Trump tried to slow it down the best that he could with his travel ban on China, a general lockdown, which was state-led, but it was encouraged at the time in March by the federal government. European travel ban, still in effect to this day by and large. He did everything that he could. Biden thinks that the dude that killed 12,000 elderly people is a better choice. He's goddamn nuts. They're completely insane. That's about all. Peace out.